Well, has anybody ever said to you that you should let it go? That you should forgive? Well, I have news. Forgiveness is not a new concept. Both religion and society have told us that we should forgive, that we should let it go. The problem is, no one has told us how. Even Disney has told us to let it go. Today, I'm going to talk about forgiveness, letting it go. I'm going to debunk some myths and misconceptions about forgiveness, and I'm going to give you a tool you can use today to help heal from past relationships, help you with your current relationships, and even your future relationships. Who's in? Woo! Okay, get ready because we're going to do this all in 15 minutes. All right, I want you to hold on to your seats, ladies and gents. Let's make it happen. All right, as we get started, I do have a question for you. Now, you can answer with clapping, raising hands, do whatever, make it loud. I know it's early. Some of us have had coffee, some a lot of coffee. But let's do this. Let's get started. All right, who here has a family? Woo! How about a spouse? Yes. How about in-laws? Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. How about an ex? Yeah. Ex anybody, ex-spouse, ex-friend, ex-boss. Yeah, exactly. Guess what? We're all humans having interactions with other humans every day, our entire life. And in those relationships, we pick up unforgiveness with our expectations. We all have them. It's perfectly normal to have expectations. Now, when you have expectations in a relationship, again, totally normal, we tend to get a little disgruntled, should I say, when somebody can't meet our expectations, especially if it's somebody we love, right? Do you agree? All right, so as we get started, I want you to participate in a little exercise if you're willing. Are you willing? Okay. I want you to think of somebody in your life who has not fulfilled your expectations. Now, I really, really hope it's not a person sitting next to you here at WICON. But it's okay if it is, because ultimately I'm not going to have you tell anybody. You don't have to tell anybody. I just want you to keep this person in your brain for just a few minutes. Ready? Okay, everybody got one? 2 or 3 or 4? Did I mention in-laws? Yeah. Ultimately, we pick up unforgiveness with our expectations. Now, we're going to get back to that person in just a few minutes. All righty? All right, so I talk about forgiveness. That's what I do. I'm a forgiveness expectations expert. When I was digging into the power of forgiveness, I found a really great study. Now, this study was published back in about 2010 in a journal called Symptom and Management of Pain. And it asked 330 nurses. Now, these are palliative care nurses that work in end of life. And they asked them, with your patients and their families, what is the #1 problem you see at the end of life in the situations you deal with? Well, they came back and said, well, with the patients, it's usually regret for something they have done in their lifetime. And with the families, lots of times, it's with the actual patient. They have anger and pain and frustration. And so, good news, though. Who's ready for the good news? good news is that when this unforgiveness situation was handled by having a forgiveness conversation, the patient at end of life had a better quality of life. The people left behind had a better grief experience. Now, my question to you is, why should we wait till end of life? Let's solve this unforgiveness problem right now. Anybody out there agree? I know, you guys need more coffee. I get it. Ultimately, the only reason we pick up unforgiveness is because of those unfulfilled expectations. Now, we pick up anger, sadness, unfulfilled expectations, and my personal favorite, smoldering resentment. I'm telling you the truth right here. We're friends, right? I'm telling you the truth. I am like Olympic level at smoldering resentment. And this is where I was pretty much my whole entire life. You see, when I was born, I didn't come into the world alone. I came in with a twin brother. And by the way, we were adorable. He had blonde hair and blue eyes. I had the darker hair and blue eyes. We started out really, really rough. Sorry, I need some water. Whew. This isn't coffee or vodka. This is just water. So ultimately, we started out really, really rough. We weighed 5 pounds together. Yeah, so we were very, very lucky to survive. And I'm not going to tell you the year, but I'm just going to tell you it was a long time ago. So we weren't only in trouble when we started our life, like really rough beginning, but we were born into a family that was just as rough. We were born into a family that was filled with abuse, alcoholism, and neglect. You see, my brother, he wasn't just my playmate. He's the guy that hid in the closet with me when the chaos in the living room was scary. He was everything to me. He was my best friend. Until he wasn't. Around our adolescence, he started turning into the person we used to hide from. And as adults, he was an alcoholic, an abuser, a rageaholic. I would have absolutely nothing to do with him. Absolutely nothing. Now, if we just met and we were going to go to coffee and do that thing that we do and get to know each other, I would have told you nothing about him in regards to my family. I would not admit that I even had a twin brother. I was filled with shame. I blamed him for not overcoming the way I did. Well, there was a day that I used to think that when he died, wouldn't bother me. Not at all. I mean, really, we had almost no relationship as adults until the day my phone rang. Now, for you millennials, I'm going to talk about a house phone. Now, when the house phone rings, and they're attached to the wall, or at least, well, they did have those hand-free sets. Wow, that was big. That was a big revolution. Anyway, so when the house phone rang, I saw that it was him, that it was his name. And I was like, I'm not going to answer that. But then my cell phone rang. We all know if your house phone rings and your cell phone rings, what does that mean? There's an emergency, right? There's an emergency. So I pick up the phone, but it wasn't my brother. It was his wife. And through her crying and her screaming, all I could hear was, "It's too late. The ambulance is on the way, but it's too late." You see, that was the day that my twin brother chose to end his life by suicide. Remember when I said I didn't think it was really going to bother me the day that he left this planet? Oh, I was wrong, so very, very wrong. I was stuck in deep, deep anger, pain, unfulfilled expectations, because ultimately he did not turn out to be the brother he was supposed to be to me. He wasn't the brother I deserved. He wasn't my best friend. Ultimately, that set me out on my own forgiveness journey. Well, you see, a friend of mine, now tell me if this has ever happened to you, a friend of mine, literally tapped me on the shoulder and said, you should probably let that go. I want to spin around and say, oh, no. You don't know what he did. You don't know what he did to me. I just was so angry. I was waiting for an apology and for him to change. But now he's gone. That hope that he would eventually become that playmate, that best friend that I had when we were born was really, really gone. And that's when I realized I was stuck in so many myths and misconceptions of forgiveness. Now, tell me if you've ever heard this one. You're supposed to forgive and forget. Yeah. Well, let me tell you this. Elephants and people, we don't forget. And there's a really good reason for that. We're supposed to remember the bad situations so we don't step back into them again. Now, last time I checked, I tend to step back in and expect those people to change. But it doesn't happen. And also, another myth and misconception about forgiveness, I hear this all the time, and I was counseling a family once, and they had a son that was an addict. The sibling of the son said, I'm not going to forgive that guy. If I do, he's going to think that I was okay with what he did. And he'll just do it again. Well, I have news. Forgiveness doesn't let anyone off the hook. It also doesn't let them out of consequences. So if they break the law, let the justice system handle that. If they're irritating, mean, abusive, don't have them over for Sunday dinner. Also, don't have them over for Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas dinner, or New Year's, right? Those boundaries are totally appropriate. You can still forgive and keep those boundaries. Ultimately, I had to uncover what forgiveness really is, how it changes your heart, mind, and soul. It truly is a gift to yourself because you let go of that anger, pain, sadness, and smoldering resentment. And you're able to actually live a much freer life without holding that pain in. For me to forgive my brother, I really had to sit down and write his story from his perspective. I had to realize that he was carrying on abuse, anger, and addiction that he grew up with, right? Ultimately, he did not have the will or the skill to meet my expectations. Now, what do I mean by that? This is super, super important. Ultimately, some people do not have the will or the skill to meet your expectations. They do not have the will. They plain old don't want to. We kind of forget to ask people. Very common in work relationships, right? That's why we have lots of contracts and things so that we understand expectations. But also in our love relationships, we need to say, hey, are you able to meet my expectation? Very, very common when a couple gets married. I mean, we've all been there. They're cute. They look amazing. Their idea of what their wedding and life is going to be like is absolutely perfect. They're going to have the perfect house, the white picket fence, the perfect 2.5 kids. There's never going to be laundry on the floor or dishes in the sink. The husband will always be kind and helpful and think of you first and tell you you're amazing. The wife will never yell at the kids or yell at the husband, right? That's what we think is going to happen. Those are our expectations. But we all know real life shows up and that's not how it works, right? There is laundry on the floor. The dishes aren't done. The kids, well, that's a whole story, right? So ultimately, you need to have an expectation conversation. Now, what do I mean by not have the skill? What I mean is, some people literally cannot do what you are asking them to do. Now, this could be because of addiction, mental health, or, and I think this is really, really big, lack of teachers, lack of somebody showing them how. You see, with my brother, he had abuse and addictions mimicked to him. That was how he saw that. He saw physical abuse all the time. He suffered physical abuse. He did not have the skill. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, remember that person I had you think of not too long ago? Yeah? I want you to think of them again. I want you to ask yourself, did they have the will? Did they have the skill? This is how you start your forgiveness journey. You can answer those questions. Now, I have some more good news for you. A lot of people don't have the skill, but they have the will. Now, those people are the people that go out of their way to learn the skill. We've all met that young father who did not have the father to show him how to be a father. But he has made a decision to learn everything he can to be the best father. So you need those people in your life. So don't worry, if you don't have the skill, ask yourself, do you have the will? Now, on my own forgiveness journey, when I uncovered will and skill, I actually went back generations, and figured out why my mom had so many issues. Yes, she was like Elizabeth Taylor. She was married 6 times. She always had a martini in one hand and a man on the other. Yeah, she was really fun at a party. Not necessarily as your mom. But when I realized that I needed to work on my forgiveness journey with them, I realized that they all really suffered from skill and will. And I realized that I was putting so many expectations on people who just really couldn't fulfill them. Now, by the way, and I'm sure yours are too, your expectations are perfectly normal. Most people, well, there's those few, but most people's expectations are perfectly normal. Mine were, I wanted a loving, happy, supportive family, and I did not get that. So ultimately, the way that you get your power back, because I know when somebody hurts me, it feels like they took something from me. Would you agree? Yeah, it feels like you're losing your power. You're the one thinking about every possibility. You're maneuvering every scenario. You're bouncing it between your head and your heart, because my goodness, they're only about 16 inches apart. But ultimately, when you are on your forgiveness journey, you can no longer expect what you once expected. Now, let me say that again. When you're on your forgiveness journey, you can no longer expect what you once expected. You see, I was expecting something from my brother that he wasn't able to give. And I can't expect that from him anymore. I could have been kinder, and I wasn't. Because every time he was around, I wanted to make sure he knew how wrong he was and how right I was. But ultimately, that wasn't the problem. The problem was he had suffered so much abuse, and he had addictions and mental health. And ultimately, he left this planet way too early. So we've talked a lot about people who have not met our expectations. Now I want to talk about somebody else. You ready? I want you to think about a person who has exceeded your expectations, who has done more than you ever expected them to do, who showed up for you, was to you everything you could have possibly needed, filled you up. Now, this could be a family member. It could be somebody who stepped in for another family member. It could be a friend. It could be a coworker. It could be somebody you met at a networking event. Somebody who chose to do more and be more than they ever were expected to do. All right, do you have them? I want you, and I challenge you today to thank them. I want you to, on a break, don't pull out your phones now, let's all not get crazy. Let's go ahead and thank them. I want you to send them a text, make a phone call, an actual phone call, and maybe even send them a card. But this is what I want you to put on that text or say in that phone call. I want you to tell them, you have exceeded my expectations. You did more for me than was ever expected. Now, I've had a lot of people in my life who have stepped in, been kind, and mentored me. And I am so thankful for all of them. You see, you've only heard a little bit of my forgiveness story. But I want you to know there were many people that helped me heal, helped me along my journey. And today, I want to thank WICON. I want to thank Shelly G. and Trevor and the whole team. Because of them, we have this, and Parker. You all have exceeded my expectations. You know, forgiveness truly is the link between love and healing. Thank you.
Misty Tyme.